Whew. We have audio. We have video. Hi, I'm Hobie1, coming to you from beautiful southern Baja in a little place called La Ventana. It's always so windy here. Well, I'm going to read this book aloud to you. We're finishing up, in fact, with a note from F.E. Higgins, followed by the Addenda. Let's go. A note from F.E. Higgins. So there you have it, the tale of Joe Zabadow and Ludlow Fitch. And let us not forget Saluki, without which, Frog, destiny could not be fulfilled. Of course, this is not the end of the story. Where did Ludlow and Joe go? What small village or town was next to play host to the secret pawnbroker and his apprentice? These questions turned over and over in my head, and I knew I had to find answers. To this end, I traveled to a country deep in the heart of the northern mountains until I reached the ancient village of Patch Pass. I wonder, does that name excite you as much as it did me when I first came across it? If you say it carefully, it sounds very much like a place we have come to know well. I rented a tiny attic room in a tall house with small leaded windows that overlook a steep high street. Each night I stand at the window and imagine that I can hear footsteps outside and that I can see a light at the top of the hill. A month has passed and I am still here, snowbound. Its bright beauty is dazzling, but also frustrating, for it prevents the remainder of my journey. As soon as I am able, I will be out on my way again, unraveling the mystery. I will take one thing, the wooden leg. It has not yielded its secret to me, but I know that I am closer to finding it now than ever before. So wish me luck on my journey. I promise whatever I find, I will bring it to you as quickly as I can. Until then, as Joe would have said, Vincit qui patitur, F.E. Higgins, Patch Pass. Okay, Addenda. On the business of body snatching. Obadiah Strang was not alone in the grisly business of body snatching. In his day, it was a common problem, to the extent that sometimes guards were paid to watch over the newly buried to ensure they remained underground. The human body was a source of great mystery to people. Although ordinary folk were too busy trying to survive to worry about its secretive workings, there were others, scientists and doctors, who were intrigued by the riddle of bone and flesh. And they knew the only way to find out more was to probe deeper. There was only so much probing you could do with a live body. For a more thorough investigation, you needed a dead one. There were laws, only the bodies of executed criminals could be used in this sort of research. But it would seem that there were not sufficient. It would seem they were not in sufficient supply to meet demand. Thus emerged the business of body snatching. At one time, it was possible to make a good living selling wickedly procured corpses to doctors and surgeons, who would dissect them alone or under the curious gaze of anatomy students. What is that sound? Jeremiah was shocked when his body-snatching henchmen suggested that Ludlow would provide a fresh corpse, but they would not have been the only ones to think in such a way. Some years later, two fellows, William Burke and William Hare, became infamous for such a thing. They saw in body snatching a marvelous business opportunity, but not for them the hard labor of digging up a corpse. The wily pair decided to bypass the grave altogether and to murder people instead. Their first victim was a lodger in Hare's guest house. A case of bed but no breakfast, I suppose, on the business of pie making. When the Sourdough brothers suggested that Horatio Cleaver put man meat in his pies, they were joking. But it puts me in mind of another man who is deadly serious about his pies, Sweeney Todd, the infamous cutthroat of Fleet Street. Sweeney lived in London some years after Horatio was butchering in Pagus Parvis. Abandoned by his parents at an early age, Sweeney was apprenticed to a Mr. John Crook, a cutler by trade who fashioned among other things, razors. It is highly probable that Crook forced Sweeney to steal for him, not an uncommon arrangement between master and apprentice, so it is not surprising that Sweeney eventually ended up in Newgate Prison. Sweeney had developed a keen instinct for survival by then and managed to persuade the prison barber, who shaved the prisoners in preparation for execution, to take him on as a soap boy, a perk of which job was the opportunity to pick pockets. When Sweeney emerged from prison, he was well equipped with the skills to indulge in the evil inclinations that were to earn him a place in history. He set up a barber shop in Fleet Street, and insalubrious, I don't know what that word means, I should probably go look it up, place in those days, and yielded wholly to his thieving and murderous desires. When you sat in Sweeney's barber chair, by all accounts, you sealed your own fate. Its design was such that at the touch of a lever, the chair would drop into the basement below, to be replaced by an empty chair that came up. Whether Sweeney slit the throat of his customer and robbed him while he was in the chair, or carried out his crimes after the victim had dropped into the basement, is unclear. What is certain is that if you went into his shop, there was no guarantee you would come out. The problem with murder is that, inevitably, there is a body that requires disposal. As luck would have it, Sweeney's shop was built on the site of an old church, complete with underground tunnels and catacombs. One of these tunnels led farther down the street, to the basement of his accomplice, a certain Mrs. Lovett. Mrs. Lovett also had a shop on Fleet Street, a pie shop. It would appear that she and Sweeney came to a gruesome arrangement that suited them both rather well. Sweeney solved that problem of the bodies. And as for Mrs. Lovett, well, suffice it to say, it was reported at the time that her pies were much sought after on account of their quality and taste. Perhaps if Sweeney had lived in Pagus Parvis, he too would have been knocking at Joe's door. Certainly his confession would have put Horatio Cleavers into the shade. If this is interesting to you, please boop the like button. You'll help the video spread to other people. Thank you very much. On the business of live burial, if you may remember that in the coffin maker's confession, Septimus Stern recalled a case where a young man had been buried alive and discovered too late by his family. One wonders how often this did happen in Ludlow's day. After all, the doctors at the time lacked the medical knowledge or expertise that we would have today to determine whether a person really is dead. A certain Count Karnicki, alive and kicking in the 1800s, had such little faith in the medical profession that he designed a device to prevent his ever being buried alive. In a similar fashion to the coffin maker, he attached a tube to a coffin and ran it to the surface. If there was any movement after burial, breathing perhaps, the rising and falling of the chest, a flag would be activated above ground and a warning bell would ring. By no means was the Count alone in his fear. Around the same time, a Mr. Martin Sheets designed his own tomb to include a telephone, so he could summon help were he to wake up buried, but not yet dead. On the business of tooth pulling, finally, we cannot finish without mention of Barton Gumbrute, the notorious tooth surgeon of Old Goat's Alley. Tooth rot was a serious problem in Ludlow's day, and dentistry was less sophisticated and more brutal affair than it is now. False teeth were available in a wide range of materials, including hippopotamus and walrus teeth, elephant ivory, and, of course, human teeth. There was also the option of a tooth transplant, as Ludlow found out. It had been discovered that when transplanting a tooth, the fresher the donor tooth, the better chance it had of taking root in the receiving gum. Widespread poverty meant there were those willing to surrender teeth for money, but unfortunately for Ludlow, Barton Gumbrute didn't always wait for willing volunteers. Jeremiah had thought to sell corpses' teeth at one stage, but unsurprisingly, such teeth failed to take. Wow. Well, gosh, that's the end of the Black Book of Secrets. Thank you for joining me. Join me again for the next book. I don't know what it be. Oh, wait a minute. I'm thinking we'll go with Hardy Boys book number 2. The House on the Cliff will be next. Right on. Thank you for joining me. Bye.